We grow up chasing benchmarks that were never designed for us. From an early age, we're handed a checklist: get good grades, go to college, land a stable job, climb the ladder. But the problem is that ladder is leaning against someone else's wall. And if you're here to lead, to build, to create something meaningful, then it's time to question every single metric of success that got you this far. Because here's the truth: traditional success is often the enemy of growth. It rewards conformity, not innovation. It values appearances over impact. It tells you that as long as you have the degree, the job title, and the right LinkedIn headline, you're doing great. But are you? Are you fulfilled? Are you growing? Are you building something that actually reflects who you are and what you're capable of? So many of us hit a point where we've done everything right and still feel stuck. That's not failure, it's misalignment. You're chasing metrics that don't match your mission, and that's where this conversation starts, because real success isn't about ticking off boxes someone else created. It's about owning your path, defining your metrics, and measuring your life by depth, not just height. Let's take titles, for example. We're taught to climb the corporate ladder, believing that a title means power, authority, validation. But here's the reality: titles don't make you a leader, impact does. You can be a manager on paper and still have zero influence, or you can be entry level and shift an entire culture just by how you show up. If you're focused more on your next title than your current impact, you're playing the wrong game. Same goes for education. You were probably taught that your value is tied to your degrees, and yes, education matters. Skills matter, but the system taught you to memorize and regurgitate, not to lead. It taught you to fit in, not to stand out. So if you're still clinging to the belief that someone else's stamp of approval makes you credible, you're missing the point. Your credibility comes from the work, the resilience, the consistency. No diploma teaches that. And let's talk about money, because that's another metric we've been handed. How much you make, what kind of car you drive, how flashy your lifestyle looks on social media. But money is not the goal. Freedom is, impact is. Money is just a tool. It amplifies who you are. So if you're chasing money without knowing who you are or what you stand for, you'll get lost in the process. Rich and empty is not success. What you need is a personal definition of success that's grounded in clarity and intention, not tradition and fear. You need to ask yourself, what does success actually mean to me? What am I willing to walk away from to make space for something better? What am I building that's bigger than me? Because when you ask those questions, you start to see that traditional metrics aren't just outdated, they are distractions. You don't need permission to redefine what success looks like. You need courage, the courage to say no to things that used to feel safe, the courage to be misunderstood for choosing a different path, the courage to stop performing and start aligning. And here's what happens when you do: you stop chasing and start building. You stop proving and start becoming. You stop following the map and start designing your own. That's when momentum shifts. That's when leadership becomes real. That's when you start living in your zone of genius instead of someone else's comfort zone. So yes, forget everything they taught you, because they weren't building what you're building. You're not here to play small. You're not here to blend in. You're here to lead, and leaders don't follow old rules. They write new ones. The moment you decide to grow beyond where you are right now, the first thing you'll realize is that not everything you know is helping you. Some of it is actually holding you back. And that's where the real work begins, not in learning new strategies, but in unlearning the old ones. Because growth doesn't come from simply adding more information. It comes from creating space for the right kind of transformation, and you can't do that if you're still operating from outdated beliefs, systems, and mindsets that no longer serve who you're becoming. Most people think personal development is about learning something new, and yes, acquiring skills matters, but what's more important is questioning what you believe to be true about yourself, about the way the world works, about what's possible. Because if you're still carrying limiting beliefs you picked up from childhood, past failures, or environments that didn't value your potential, then all the learning in the world won't help. You'll sabotage it before it ever takes root. Unlearning is uncomfortable. It's not neat or easy. It requires a level of self-awareness most people avoid. You have to look at the habits you've normalized, the excuses you've dressed up as logic, the stories you've told yourself to stay safe. You have to dig them up, examine them, and ask the hard question, is this actually true for me, or is it just what I've been taught? That's how change begins. Take leadership, for example. Maybe you were taught that leadership means being the loudest voice in the room, or that you have to have all the answers, or that vulnerability is weakness, but none of that is true. Real leadership requires listening more than talking. It requires asking better questions, not having perfect answers. It requires the courage to be transparent and the discipline to hold people and yourself accountable. If you don't unlearn what leadership used to mean to you, you'll never step into what it really is. The same goes for failure. If you were taught that failure is something to avoid, you'll never take bold risks. You'll stay small, stay safe, and convince yourself you're being responsible. But what if failure is just feedback? What if every failure is just a stepping stone that gets you closer to clarity, closer to mastery? Until you unlearn your fear of failing, you'll keep making decisions from fear, not from vision. Unlearning also means letting go of control in the areas where control isn't serving you. Perfectionism, for example, often masquerades as high standards. But perfectionism is not about excellence, it's about fear. Fear of being judged, fear of not being enough, fear of looking like you don't have it all together. If you've been taught that your value comes from performance, then unlearning that is going to feel like rebellion. But it's necessary because you can't grow if you're constantly editing yourself for approval. Relearning is the second part of the equation, and it requires humility. You have to become a student again. You have to ask for help. You have to be willing to not be good at something long enough to get good at it. That's a hard shift, especially for high performers, but every new level of your life will require a new version of you. And that version won't be built on yesterday's mindset. Relearning means building systems that support your future, not your past. It means creating routines, environments, and relationships that align with where you're headed. It means choosing inputs that stretch your thinking and challenge your blind spots. And most of all, it means being okay with not having all the answers, because the goal is growth, not perfection. So if you feel stuck, it might not be because you're not learning enough. It might be because you're holding on to things you were never meant to carry this far, beliefs that made sense at one stage of your life but don't apply anymore. It's not your fault you learned them. But it is your responsibility to unlearn them. You don't need more motivation. You need clarity. You need the self, rest to let go of what's no longer aligned, and the confidence to step into new territory. That's how reinvention works. You release, you rebuild, you rise, and you do it over and over again. Forget the idea that growth is linear. It's not. It's a cycle of unlearning and relearning again and again as you evolve. And every time you unlearn something that kept you small, you get one step closer to becoming who you were always meant to be. You've been running on someone else's operating system for too long. The routines you follow, the way you make decisions, the way you measure your day, all of it inherited from school, from past jobs, from people who never had the life you're trying to build. And if you want to lead at a higher level, if you want real ownership over your time, your energy, and your results, then it's time to build your own operating system, one that actually works for you. You don't need another productivity hack. You need a framework that helps you show up every single day with clarity and intention. Most people wake up and let the day run them. They react to notifications, emails, other people's priorities. And then they wonder why they feel behind, burnt out, or disengaged. But high performers, real leaders, don't operate like that. They don't wait for permission. They don't drift, they design. And that starts with building systems that support the life and business they actually want to create. Your operating system isn't just your calendar. It's how you make decisions, how you prioritize, how you manage your mind when pressure hits. It's the set of rules and rituals you've intentionally built to keep you aligned with your goals, not just when things are easy, but especially when they're not. If you don't have systems, you default to feelings. And feelings are unreliable. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline built through systems doesn't. So when you build your own operating system, you're not just managing time. You're managing energy. You're deciding in advance how you're going to show up before your emotions even get a vote. That's real freedom. That's what separates top performers from everyone else. Start by getting brutally honest about what's working and what's not. Audit your day. Where are you leaking time? Where are you reacting instead of leading? Where are you doing things out of habit instead of alignment? The first step to building something better is tearing down what no longer works. And no, it won't feel good. You'll want to keep the familiar even if it's ineffective. But comfort never built momentum. Change did. Then build around your strengths, not someone else's ideal morning routine, not what a book told you to do, yours. If you do your best thinking at night, stop forcing yourself to be a 5 a.m. person just because it sounds impressive. If deep work is where you add the most value, then structure your day to protect it like your life depends on it. Because your progress does. You don't need to copy anyone. You need to know yourself well enough to build with intention. That means protecting your non-negotiables. Whether it's a workout, time to think, or simply space to plan your week, these are not luxuries, they are requirements. If you're not clear on what fuels you, you'll burn out trying to fuel everything else. Your system should be designed to sustain you, not exhaust you. Also, simplify. Complexity kills execution. You don't need a 14-step morning routine and a color-coded task board to get results. You need clarity. What are the 3 most important things you need to get done today to move the needle? Focus on those. Do them first, then move on. Most people confuse being busy with being effective. The real ones know that simplicity drives results. Your operating system also includes how you communicate and lead. Are you setting clear expectations or just hoping people figure it out? Are you giving feedback consistently or waiting until things break? Are you holding yourself to the same standards you expect from others? Your leadership system needs structure, meetings with purpose, goals with deadlines, feedback with action. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you design it, and here's the key, your system should evolve. What worked last year may not work this year. As you grow, your time becomes more valuable, your energy more selective, you'll outgrow tools, routines, even people. That's not failure, that's feedback. Build in time to review, to reflect, to upgrade your system regularly. Treat yourself like a high-performance machine. Maintenance is not optional. You're not here to be managed. You're here to lead, and leaders don't rely on willpower. They build systems that make greatness the default. So stop trying to force results with scattered effort. Build an operating system that aligns with who you are and where you're going. That's how you scale your life, your business, and your leadership without burning out or breaking down. There's a difference between doing what you're told and doing what needs to be done. That difference is ownership. And if you want to lead, grow, and make an actual impact, obedience isn't going to get you there. Obedience waits for instruction. Ownership creates outcomes. Obedience asks, "What do you want me to do?" Ownership asks, "What result am I responsible for?" And that mindset shift is everything. In traditional environments, obedience gets rewarded. Follow the rules, don't question the system, show up, do your part, and stay in your lane. But if you're here to build something bigger, whether it's a team, a business, or a version of yourself you haven't met yet, then blind obedience won't cut it. Because when things go sideways, when no one has the answers, when the path is unclear, the people who rise are the ones who take ownership. Not the ones who waited for someone to tell them what to do. Ownership means stepping into the driver's seat, even when you don't have all the information, even when it's messy, even when it's not your fault. especially when it's not your fault. That's the kind of leadership people remember. That's the kind of mindset that separates someone who just works here from someone who moves the entire mission forward. People who take ownership don't need constant direction. They're not looking to be micromanaged. They're not looking to do the bare minimum. They take initiative, they see gaps, and instead of pointing them out, they fill them. They hold themselves to high standards, not because someone told them to, but because they understand what's at stake. They care, and that care shows up in their execution, their energy, and their consistency. If you're stuck in a cycle of waiting, waiting for approval, waiting for clarity, waiting for someone to notice your effort, you're still in obedience mode, and that's a hard truth to swallow because it feels safer there. It feels good to be the one who follows through. But safety isn't the goal, impact is, growth is, and those things only come when you stop following and start owning. Ownership also means owning the hard stuff. The missed goals, the breakdowns in communication, the mistakes, leaders don't deflect. They take responsibility, not to take the blame, but to create the solution. When something goes wrong, ownership doesn't say, "That wasn't my fault." It says, "That happened on my watch, and I'm going to fix it." That's power, that's trust, that's leadership. This mindset applies to your personal growth too. If your progress is dependent on external motivation, you're operating from obedience. You're following someone else's routine, someone else's advice, hoping it'll change your life. But when you take ownership of your development, you stop outsourcing responsibility, you create structure. You hold yourself accountable, you stop looking for someone to come save you, and you start building yourself. You don't get ahead by being compliant, you get ahead by being committed to the outcome, to the process, to the people around you, and that requires initiative, not ego, not arrogance, just the willingness to say, "This is my lane and I own it." Now let's be clear, ownership doesn't mean doing everything yourself. It doesn't mean burnout. It doesn't mean being a martyr for the mission. It means being accountable, delegating when necessary, asking for help when needed, but never, ever stepping back from responsibility. That's how teams grow, that's how trust is built, that's how performance scales. So if you're leading a team, create a culture of ownership. Don't just reward the rule followers, reward the problem solvers. Give people autonomy and let them rise to the challenge. Coach them to take initiative. Build systems where responsibility is shared, not avoided, because a team full of obedient people might be easy to manage, but a team full of owners, that's a team that wins. Obedience might look like order on the surface, but it rarely drives momentum. Ownership is messy, it's uncomfortable, it requires you to lead even when no one's watching, but it's also where all the growth lies. All the innovation, all the breakthroughs. So if you want to play a bigger game, stop asking what needs to be done. Start asking what you're willing to take responsibility for. That's the mindset that moves you from employee to leader, from passive to powerful, from following the plan to writing your own. There comes a point where you have to realize that the version of success you were taught to chase doesn't match the life you're meant to live. From a young age, we're pushed into systems designed to produce predictable results. Pass the test, follow the rules, don't question authority, stay on track. But what if your greatest potential has nothing to do with that track? What if everything they taught you was just the baseline, and you were always meant for something beyond it? You were trained to fit into a curriculum, and that curriculum was built to create structure, not spark. Compliance, not creativity. It wasn't designed to teach you how to lead, innovate, or take risks. It was designed to teach you how to follow instructions and meet expectations. And if you're still living your life according to that script, don't be surprised if you feel unfulfilled. Because your potential was never supposed to be boxed into a grading scale, a standardized path, or a performance rubric. Think about how many people are walking around with degrees, resumes, and credentials and still feel stuck. They did everything they were told, got the education, landed the job, followed the steps, but they're not lit up. They're not building anything that reflects who they truly are, because somewhere along the way, they outsourced their vision to a system that was never designed with them in mind. Your potential isn't in their curriculum, it's in your capacity to think differently, to challenge what you've been told, to ask better questions, to chase ideas that don't make sense to anyone else until you make them real. That kind of thinking doesn't come from textbooks. It comes from ownership, from action, from failing forward and learning how to course correct when the stakes are high. And the truth is, some of the most capable, creative, high-performing people feel like outsiders in the environments they were trained to succeed in. They were told they were too much, too intense, or too ambitious. But that intensity is the exact thing that's going to carry you beyond where those systems ever intended you to go. You weren't meant to be manageable, you were meant to be powerful, but to access that power, you have to stop seeking permission and start claiming responsibility. Potential doesn't live in someone else's approval. It lives in how you show up every day when no one's clapping. It lives in your willingness to take the uncomfortable route, to walk away from the easy path, to build your own framework for success. That means rewriting the rules you've internalized. It means unlearning the belief that you need to be chosen, selected, or certified in order to be valuable. You're already valuable. Your work is to build the systems, habits, and mindset that turn that value into results. And here's the part no one tells you: the path to unlocking your potential will look wildly different than the one you were taught to follow. It'll feel messy, it'll include failure, it will absolutely include moments where you question everything. But that's the price of growth. Predictable paths lead to predictable outcomes. If you want something different, you have to do something different. That might mean launching a business when everyone says it's too risky. Speaking up in a room where you were taught to stay quiet. Pivoting your career when it doesn't make sense on paper but feels deeply aligned. These aren't steps that fit into a syllabus, but they're the moves that shape leaders. Your potential is dynamic, it's evolving, and it doesn't need to be validated by a grade or title or credential. It needs to be activated through action, consistency, and clarity. But most of all, it needs your belief. Because no system, no curriculum, no outside force will ever believe in you enough to replace the belief you need to carry for yourself. So stop waiting for someone to tell you you're ready. Stop waiting for the right time, the perfect plan, or the green light from the people who built a system that was never built for you. You don't need their curriculum, you need your calling. And when you finally stop trying to fit the mold and start building your own path, that's when your potential stops being a possibility and starts becoming proof.